Oh my gosh. I have just read some of the craziest, scary statistics that I'm going to share with you. Um, we have a massive problem happening in our country that nobody is really talking about, or if they are, I don't think we're talking about it enough because we're not talking about solutions. But I have some solutions, so we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to share with you where this all started. Oh, and let me put my little background on, so you guys have ways that you can connect with me. Let me go ahead and find that there. Okay. So this started because Jack and I were having a conversation about Tesla, and that Tesla recently announced it's going to shut down the plants that were producing the really, really high end, like cars that were like $100,000 plus. They're going to focus on the Teslas that are at a more moderate price range, and then they're going to use those factories that they were producing the high end Teslas, and they're going to focus on making robots for us. So we won't have to do our laundry and empty our dishwasher, and we'll have our robots in our house. And as he's telling me this, and Jack is he is a tech person, right? He loves tech and all that. And I am like, we are killing ourselves. We are on a road to extinction. Like we are self-destructing. And he's like, no, no, why do you think this? And I'm like, well, first of all, our food and our pharma killing us. Like, let's just start there, right? But I was like, this idea that AI and robots are going to take over and do everything for us. And this is my personal opinion, I think is a dangerous road to go down because people will lose purpose. And I said, we are created in the image of God, and God creates. We are meant to create. We are meant to have purpose. Do you know that retirement is not even biblical? The idea that you just stop doing the work that you are here to do, it's not even biblical. And so I remember I was watching this girl who I follow on TikTok. She's fabulous. She lives in like the middle of nowhere woods in Canada in this like flatbread truck that she's turned into a house. And it's like totally wild. Like she chops her wood. She's like an hour from having to go to town to get milk or anything. And her story is really fascinating. She was living in Canada and she had an apartment and she had a job and was living in regular society like the rest of us, right? And was struggling with massive anxiety and depression. And just something overcame her, and she decided she was going to go kind of like off grid, live in the Canadian woods, and build this house on this flatbed truck. It's really cute. It looks like a little tree house, and it's one of these, like, think of like an RV, right? And she converts this truck. But she said now her survival is a lot of work. She has to cut wood. She's constantly dealing with pipes. Like she's got a plan if she's going to go into town and how much food she's going to have because it's an hour away. Like there's a lot of work in just her day to day. And she has a job that she travels to and she still does. But the majority of her day is living the way that I guess we lived, 100 years ago. And she said it was very interesting that shortly after this life change, her depression and her anxiety went away. And she equated it to the fact that she doesn't have time to think about, am I happy? I don't have time to think about, am I depressed? And I wonder in our quest for comfort and all of this, free time, we have so much time to think. I think my grandmother, right? My grandmother was a single mom in the 1940s and 1950s. And, I wish she was alive today because I remember talking to her as an adult and we were asking her things like, we asked her like, what was menopause like, right, back then? And she was like, menopause? She's like, I don't know. I was busy raising kids and being a single parent. Maybe I had a hot flash. I don't really remember. But she never really went into this like, am I depressed? And my grandmother was one of the happiest, most positive people you could ever meet. She lived to be 100 years old. And even at 100 years old, she was funny and happy. And, she wasn't on social media comparing her life to everybody else. And she wasn't constantly being like, am I fulfilled? She was just living her life. And so I said, I think the robots coming and taking over where people don't have purpose anymore is actually not going to be good for us as a human race, right? So I decided to do a little digging, and I'm going to read you some of these stats that I found and what it comes down to, okay, right? Because we think we're so connected. Here we are, we're connecting through social media. And obviously I love social media. I'm showing up, twice a week with you guys, and I connect with a lot of people on social media. But here's the facts of what we're finding, okay? So the most recent detailed breakdown that's available, where they did CDC data, said that 33.5% of U.S. women reported feeling lonely always, usually, or sometimes. And overall, US adult loneliness remains high, that 40 to 57% of Americans experience loneliness to some degree. That's more than half. More than half of us are saying we feel lonely. And that's wild to me because we're so connected through our little electronic leashes. We're so connected. But more than half, 57% are saying they're experiencing loneliness to some degree. They did another survey that said it was APA's Stress in America survey, and it found that 54% of US adults feel isolated some of the time, 50% felt left out, 50% lacked companionship, and nearly 70%, it was 69%, said they needed more emotional support than they actually receive. This is crazy to me. They said that, so I will say this, it's higher among Gen Zs and millennials. And what they have found is that lonely individuals, people who feel lonely, face higher risks of depression, anxiety, lower vitality, and worse mental health. And there's a link, a link between loneliness and isolation and depression. Right now in the United States, we are at historically high rates of depression. It's 18%. And there's a very strong link with the depression to loneliness. Okay. And it's often women who often report more poor mental health days that are tied to loneliness. Harvard and Making Caring Common, they did a study in 2024, and they found that among lonely adults, 61% reported not having enough close friends or family, and 67% felt that they were not part of meaningful groups. And then this is where it ties into what I was talking about before, about the purpose. Many lonely respondents, around 75%, so 75% of the people who are saying that they're feeling lonely, also reported little or no sense of meaning and purpose in life. In that same Harvard report, loneliness often co-occurs with anxiety and depression. So 81% of lonely adults deal with anxiety and depression, and a lack of meaning and purpose, 75%. And here's what's crazy. Strong female friendships are linked to better mental health, reduced depression risk, and a greater sense of purpose. And the higher vulnerability, it's actually groups of between 18-year-olds and 34 years old. They have some of the highest rates. And so I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, we're only going to make this worse. Because if we have robots doing everything for us and we have no purpose, and we have all this time to sit and think about, am I lonely? Am I anxious? Am I depressed? This is not going to help us, right? And so why is it in a world where we're so connected, do people feel so lonely? And I think we know this, but we're not doing much about it, right? How many times have we gone to a restaurant and we've seen a family and the whole family is sitting there on their phone? I mean, Jack and I will go out and I'll see other people and they're on a date and both of them are on their phone, right? I mean, we have 3 teenagers. We the screenagers, it's a real thing, right? How many people are disconnecting because they're looking at other people and their fake lives on social media? I mean, let's be real, guys. We only show what we want people to see on Facebook and on social media, right? Like that is true. We show our highlight reels. We show our vacation and our good time and our this. We're not really showing the bad stuff. Now, there's a whole other, maybe TikTok world where people are sharing that kind of stuff. But for the most part, we're picking and choosing what we want people to see, right? And so we compare that, and then we always are going to come up short. So it's really got me thinking, like, first of all, if we have this massive loneliness, what do we do about this? And I will tell you, having moved, so I recently moved. I was living in an area for a very long time, And I do think it's where you live in the country. So I'll give an example. When I moved to Colorado, I found it was very easy to make friends. I found it was very easy to find groups. I had a huge group of support system out there, a huge group of friends, because it's a very transient area. You don't have a lot of people who were from there. You had a lot of people moving in there. They don't have a lot of extended family. And so there was a need. People really needed to make friends. When I moved back to New Jersey, it was actually really, really difficult to do that because people here have, they've either never left, they still are friends with their high school friends. They have a wide support system with like cousins and aunts and people who've just lived in the area for a very long time. And so they don't have that need to go out and meet people the same way. So I think where you live in the country and you live in an area where it's very transient, that's going to play into that. So I really struggled with that when I moved back to New Jersey. Well, I've recently moved into another town, into a different county, and it's been really challenging. I don't have a child in school. I'm not working a job where I'm making friends at a job where, I work my business virtually and off my laptop and stuff like that. So I made a decision actually a few months ago that I was like, all right, if I'm going to be staying here and living here for the next few years, I need to make a concerted effort to get out and meet people. And so I'm going to share with you, if you are feeling lonely, because at least half of you statistically are, what are some things that you can do? So I think one thing is finding groups to get involved in. We have Meetup. Meetup is something that is available to everybody and it's free, and you can go on and you can find meetup groups. And these are people who want to meet up and meet with other people. Okay. And so when you go to a meetup event, you're there with other people who also want to meet other people. All right. Also Facebook groups. I have this beautiful friend that I've met. Her name is Siobhan, and she created a group in the area that I live in. And it was just a social group for women because she also wanted to make friends. And there's a number of groups like this. When I was living in a different county, there was a group. It was the ladies of that county, and they just wanted to do fun things together. So if you go into Facebook, you may find that there's groups in your town of women who want to do things. There could be a newcomers club. I had joined the newcomers club when I moved, and I got to meet people that way. When I had moved back to New Jersey originally, I joined the junior league, and that was a way to get to know people and meet people. So making a concerted effort to get out and to meet people and to find people. So whether that is through a Facebook group or that is through a meetup group. And if it doesn't exist, then you can create one. I mean, that's how this one group started. Siobhan, she didn't have anybody and she said, let me create one. And so you can create one. If you can create your own meetup event, you can, create your own group. And I think there's a place for everybody, right? And this is also where, direct sales gets an interesting rap. Let me just say that. I've been in the direct sales industry for 28 years, and I think it is a fabulous industry because it gives somebody an opportunity to have a business with no business experience, very low risk, very low startup. And direct sales is a little bit different than an MLM. Direct sales is you're buying a product from a manufacturer, you're selling it to a client. You don't have to team build if you don't want. You can just retail your product. It's just that rather than having a building in town, right, it's out of your home. But I will say that one of the biggest benefits is the community. It's the women, it's the support. When I moved from New Jersey to Colorado, it was like having an instant group of girlfriends because I plugged into the community from my direct sales business. And so I had a huge support system right away because of all these women that were part of that direct sales company. When I moved back from Colorado to New Jersey, those were my initial friends. They were the women who were within my direct sales business that I was able to connect with and meet. And to this day, some of my dearest and closest friends, the women that I value their opinion and that I can count on at any time, are from being in that direct sales industry. Some of you know the story. A couple of years ago, Emily had driven to Boston, which I told her not to do. She was driving up to Boston and she was driving back from Boston, and it was in the middle of a snowstorm, which I had also told her not to do. And she finally calls me panicky, like terrible, terrible blizzard conditions. And I was able to call a woman who I'm friends with from my direct sales company who lived 15 minutes from where she was and be able to get her there and safely. And she took care of her for the night and helped her with her car and everything. But, for people who give that industry such a bad rap, I feel like the big thing that they're missing is that it gives women community. It gives women purpose. It gives them connection. It gives them a way to connect with other people. And so if you are feeling lonely, that may be something to look into. Like look into joining a direct sales company just to meet some other women, just to get connected. Volunteer volunteering. This is one of the fastest ways you can grow a child's self-esteem is through volunteering. Find ways to volunteer. That's why I got in the junior league, right? Volunteering connects you with other people who also want to give back. And we definitely do not have an overabundance of volunteers. There's so many groups. When I moved to Colorado, one of the first groups I joined was an organization, I don't even know if it still exists, called Metro Volunteers. And it was this huge organization of people who just wanted to volunteer here and there at different times and not commit to have to volunteer every single week. I mean, church, there's a huge revival of young people getting back into church, but getting into a life group. Again, when I moved into New Jersey, it took me a while to find a church, but then I joined a life group and I got to know people there. See, I believe that we are meant to live in community. I believe that people are meant to be together face to face, eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart. And while it's great to connect with people through social media and to stay in touch, it doesn't replace human connection. It doesn't replace those real things. And this is why these stats are coming out and telling us that people are so lonely because they're just behind their phones and they think they're connecting and they're really not. We need that girlfriend time. And so I read a study that it's something like women need a girls' night out like every 24 days or something for their mental health. So one of the things that I actually do is when I open my calendar, I just sat down because I'm kind of planning out my February, and I'm looking at my make sure that every week I have some kind of connection activity. It could be a social event, a networking event, but something, a girls' night out, something that's on my calendar every week that gets me out of my house and connecting with other humans. This is vital. This is so vital. So I think this is an important conversation to have for a few reasons. One, if you are feeling this way, you are not alone. Because what happens is we think we're the only one who feels this way. We think, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Nobody else does. You are not alone. You are not the only one feeling this way. In fact, like 75% of people are feeling this way, and at least half are feeling lonely, right? You have a choice, though, of how you're going to choose to handle that. You do not need to stay like that. You may need to be a little proactive. You may need to go find that meetup group and show up at that time that feels a little bit awkward, right? You may need to go into your Facebook and start looking in your area and looking in your community. Maybe your library has an event. Join a gym. Jack and I were at this event where they were doing like margarita and Mexican at our gym. And there were a bunch of people who were coming in. They were all saying hi to each other. And we were like, oh, I wonder if they're over at the work area. There's like a workplace. It just turns out that they all take classes together. Now, I don't take classes there. I kind of do my own thing, but they all take classes together. And that's how they've created the sense of community. So join a gym. That's a great way to find community. Again, there's so many meetup events that you could go to. And I'm a very big believer if something doesn't exist, that you create what you want, that you create what it is that you're looking for. And if you're like, I would never do a direct sales business, maybe you don't do it for the money. Maybe you do it for the connection in the community, and if that's something you're interested in or you're looking at, I actually have a really great video. It's not here. You can DM me for it, but it's like the questions to ask because, they're not all the same. They're not all legit. You do want to make sure that you're with a legit company that's part of the DSA.org, that is government regulated and all of that. You don't want to end up in something that you don't want to be in. But I have a great video and I'll ask you like, these are the questions that you should ask if you're looking at opportunities. Volunteer, find a church, find a place to connect. So I'm curious, number one, in the comments, tell me, what do you think about this idea of like the robots taking over and us like no longer having purpose, no longer having goals, because we don't need to anymore because they're doing everything. Like, what are your thoughts? Am I the only one who's worried that this is like the end of humanity? And then also, what are some ways that you've connected and found your circle of friends? Like, what are the ways that you found that have been really helpful for you to be able to connect with other people? Let's kind of share some ideas, because maybe you're going to see somebody comment on something and go, hey, that would be great for me to try too. And if you're, looking for a community, so I would say this, if you're looking for a community and you have a business, that's what we have. Hey Girl, You Can. And we would love for you to be part of our community there. If you're looking for a community and you don't have a business, but you would like to start one, then DM me and I'll tell you a little bit more about my direct sales business, and you can check out our group and check out that. But get connected. Get connected to other people. Don't stay in isolation. You are not meant to do life alone. You are meant to do life in community. You are meant to do life with fabulous women who support you, who cheer each other on, who do life together. It is one of the biggest blessings that I have had, that I've always had incredible women around me. I've always had a great community of people around me. And that started with my direct sales business. And then I've just continued to grow that into all other avenues. It has not been easy. Sometimes it's been me proactively going out and going to events and being, I'm going to show up and I don't know anybody, but I do put myself out there so that I can meet people, and making sure that there's always something on my calendar every week that's going to fill that human connection need, right? And so I can't wait to hear your thoughts. How many of you were shocked by these stats? But we can change this. We can change this because one woman can start to change everything, right? It's that ripple effect, because you set the stage and then your friends will start to see that and your friends will start to see that and they'll connect with other people. Let's start a chain reaction to get back to face-to-face, heart-to-heart, real connections and fight this epidemic of loneliness.